Draft week. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na, Draft week. Hey, y'all, it's Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, a special draft week episode. I'm coming at you solo because I wanted to do a breakdown that I've been looking at for a little while. Finally got it all together, and I'm going to do a grading of the Saints' last 10 first round draft picks. It's kind of a different way to go about it. I'm not grading the entire draft. I'm only grading the first round pick, and I'm kind of looking at production versus where it was versus who else was on the board and how it kind of panned out. So we're going to get into that. But first things first, I do have to mention Odyssey is doing something special for this year's NFL draft. Analysts/insiders Brian Baldinger and Jason Lockenfor are hosting the 2023 Odyssey Draft Show. Join them on the first night of the draft as they talk with local experts from Odyssey podcasts across the NFL landscape. Experts, I struggle to say that. I always say experts. Yours truly, that's me. I'll be joining them to give instant reaction to the Saints pick at number 29, assuming they stay there. Leading up to the draft, also check out Baldy's podcast In the Huddle for his expert prospect breakdowns. And of course, always listen to Inside Black and Gold. The draft show starts Thursday, April 27th at 6 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. You can listen on the free Odyssey app or watch live on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. It's going to be a great time. Let's get it. But all right, remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can keep up with my latest work at WWL.com. And you can also follow my co-host, Steve Geller, at Steve Geller WWL. He's not here today. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that. If you haven't left a rating or review, please do. It really helps us out. And without further ado, we're going to get right into this. And the first thing I have to tell you about the grades for the last 10 Saints first round picks is there are actually 11, because I'm not going to give you a grade. I'm going to break down the last three, but I still think they're too early to tell. So I'm going to break them down, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to give them an official grade. I'm not going to count them towards the 10 because I'm not interested in saying Chris Olave is done as a prospect. Peyton Turner's done as a prospect, right? So we're going to talk about it, but I'm going to kind of put them off to the side and then count 10 back from there. The problem is when you do that, you get to a draft with multiple first-round picks. So instead of trying to pick one over the other, I'm just going to have both. So technically there will be 11. First things first, let's go through the incomplete grades, which will account for Chris Olave, Trevor Penning, Peyton Turner. Chris Olave and Trevor Penning were in 2022. Olave was the 11th pick. Trevor Penning was number 19. I am giving Olave a grade for now / incomplete, right? So what that means is I think what rookie was an A. The incomplete means that could change. I am not giving him a set grade. I'm not giving the Saints a set grade on that pick until we see how the career pans out, right? Does he take a step forward this year? Does he do the work in the offseason to bulk up as much as he needs to, right? I don't want to see him get too bulky and get slowed down, but I do need to see him get a little bigger, a little tougher. Kind of like Mike Thomas from year 1 to 2 and year 2 to 3. He always got a little bit tougher, a little bit stronger. That's what I need to see from Olave. And if he can do that and he can build on that rookie campaign, which anytime you have 1,000-yard rookie receiver, feeling pretty good about that pick, even though you had to trade up to get it, we'll see, right? So this is going to be a big year for him in terms of building on what he did well as a rookie and improving on what he didn't do so well, which was ball security, right? Contested catches, run after catch. Those are all things that I think if you add those to what he was able to do in his rookie season, which was very much spot, target, stop, you have a Pro Bowl caliber receiver. You don't have that yet. So that's something. Trevor Penning, I'm giving a straight incomplete to. I thought he looked solid when he was on the field, but we just didn't see enough, right? And I'm not even going to give him a grade. I'm just going to say incomplete. Let's see what happens. I still think the pick is okay, right? And so one way I'm going to kind of break this down is you're going to look at the Pro Bowlers who went within 30 picks of the draft pick here. I don't need to talk about, there was a 4th round pick who is a Hall of Famer, that they weren't getting picked in the first round. But if there's a guy who goes within 30 picks of where the Saints picked, I'll list them and we can talk about, okay, if there were 2 picks later, then that was a miss. If they were 25 picks later, well, they weren't going in that range anyway, so it would have been a reach. It would have been a good reach, but it would still been a reach. So the further they are away from where the Saints picked, the less I'm going to value them as a miss. But so if you want to start with these picks, there were 0 Pro Bowlers past 11 through 30 picks beyond Trevor Penning as a rookie. So there are none really there. If you want to look at some of the players they could have picked, wide receiver Jameson Williams, he went to the Lions at number 12. I think the Saints are probably happy they stayed away from Jameson Williams at this point, considering he missed his entire rookie season, or at least a majority of it, and now he's going to be out 6 games with the sports betting suspension. So his career has gotten off to a rocky start at best. It's not something the Saints wanted to deal with, and the fact is they needed Chris Olave through a majority of last season. They will need him this season, so his availability is a big bonus there in terms of I'm not mad they didn't pick Jameson Williams. Behind him was number 13, Jordan Davis. I did want to see the Saints go get a defensive tackle, but the second you saw them trade up, we knew it was for a wide receiver, so it's hard for me to call that a miss. 20 was Kenny Pickett. I'm not sold on Kenny Pickett. I don't think there was a first-round pick in last year's draft. I was perfectly fine with them passing on Kenny Pickett. Then you look at the running backs. I would have loved to see them bring in a running back. First round is tough, but still you can look at 36, Breece Hall went to the Jets, and then 41, Kenneth Walker. I think the second-round pick in Alontae Taylor was excellent. So these picks, I think, are in the range of you're okay with it, regardless of how they maybe pan out this next season or two. But they're in that range. The question is Peyton Turner. And I think a lot of people are ready to call Peyton Turner a bust. He was the number 28 pick in the 2021 draft. It was another example of the Saints falling in love with measurables and doing it at the Senior Bowl. Right? We see a lot of these picks. A lot of them are Senior Bowl guys, and he is another one. He's frustrating mainly because he hasn't gotten on the field. And part of that is due to health, right? Part of that is due to just not being ready, I think. And this is going to be a big season for him. And so I'm not giving him a D or a failing grade yet, but I'm also not giving him a good grade. I'm putting him at a C-, but with a lot of opportunity ahead of him to either climb into a B, drop into a D, right? Like this is going to be a big season. Year 3 is always a big season. And what's really saving this pick for me is you look at some of the players who went. I don't know if there's another guy who you're looking at like, oh, they should have taken him, right? There's one Pro Bowler from that draft in the range of 28 to 58, right? Because that's what we're looking at. Landon Dickerson, center, he went to the Eagles. If you had picked a third center in a row, because that's what this would have been, if the Saints for the Saints to land the only Pro Bowler so far, obviously that's going to change in this draft, they would have had to pick a center for the third consecutive year. They had Eric McCoy, then they had Cesar Ruiz. So that wasn't happening. So the other guys you're looking at, Greg Rousseau, he was my pick in my final Saints mock draft. I still would have preferred if they went that route, but he hasn't been blowing the doors off either. So you're fine with it. Running back Javonte Williams, number 35 to the Broncos. Safety Javon Holland to the Dolphins at 36. Number 47, Asante Samuel Jr. to the Chargers, and then Azeez Ojulari, brother of BJ Ojulari, to the Giants at 50. I mean, you can go through there and tell me there are a bunch of other players you would have rather picked. I don't know. So I think there is still room for this pick to be successful, but it's going to depend on what Peyton's able to do in year 3. This should be a little opened up for him, and hopefully he can take advantage of that. All right. So I'm going to break these down starting. So now we're on to the actual picks that I'm going to be. So now we're on to the picks that I am giving a real grade to. And if you want to know the breakdown, there's 2 Ds, 1 C, 4 Bs, and 4 As. I'm going to start with the lowest grade and work my way up to the top. This first segment is going to be the Ds, then I'm going to do the Cs and Bs in the second segment, and then the As in the fourth and in the final segment, which include a couple, bonus notes of, hey, they didn't have a first round pick this year. And we have to start. And so I'm glad we're going to get this out of the way early, because from here on out, it's mostly going to be positive, right? There are 2 really bad picks in this kind of smattering of Saints draft strategy here. And yeah, the first one is rough. And it's going to be Stephon Anthony, linebacker. He was the number 32 pick in the 2015 draft. It was the second pick of that draft. This is the draft pick you got back from the Seahawks in the Jimmy Graham trade. So it was kind of a gravy pick. And if you go back in Saints history, you can see when they have this extra draft pick, they tend to at least use one of these picks on a skill position, right? Which linebacker is technically a skill position. You know, when you had 2 picks this past season, you brought in Chris Olave. When you had 2 picks in 2011, you brought in Mark Ingram. So I think this is the pick when they have a second one that they try to go outside the box, and traditionally they'd be building within the lines. So this is the number 32 pick. They went with Stephon Anthony, and this is going to be the lowest grade in my listings. It might surprise some people because Stephon is easily one of the worst picks in Saints history, but it can't be the floor. And keep in mind, while I'm not grading every pick in Saints history, you still have to leave some room for the true spectacular busts, right? You need to leave some room for the Cedric Ellises, for the Jonathan Sullivans, if you want to go back real far, Russell Erkslavin, who's a kicker they drafted at number 11. And then you look at like, okay, going forward, you know, there are worse busts than Stephon Anthony, especially at the number 32 spot. You're not guaranteed to start at that spot. You're not even guaranteed a starter at that spot. And he did come in as a rookie and lead the team in tackles. He had 112 tackles in the 2015 season. And there are worse examples of a bust than that, right? I mean, Jamarcus Russell, like the Saints haven't picked in the top 10 in any of these years. But in order to be a real ugly bust, it has to be a top 10 pick. A lot of times it has to be a quarterback. So you look at like a Jamarcus Russell. The Saints haven't had a bust of that caliber, so I can't give them an F on any of them. That said, this is the closest. Stephon Anthony, he was off the team 2 years later. That's tough. Like, there's only one other D on this list, but he at least finished out his contract, right? And so let's go on to that now. And that's 2018, the number 14 overall pick. You'll remember him as Mr. Two Firsts in a lot of conversations. That's Marcus Davenport, defensive end out of UTSA. He's also a tough example, right? I'm not going to give him a failing grade. I'm not going to give the Saints a failing grade in terms of their strategy, just because we see a talented player in there. You've seen it. The talent is there. It remains untapped, but the vision exists. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. And this year, when he did stay on the field, he just wasn't right. If this was the number 27 pick, which is where the Saints were originally picking before trading up to number 14, I'd be fine with this pick. I'd probably put it in the C+ range in terms of, man, this didn't work out, but you can see what the goal was here. You can see why the Saints brought him in. Another Senior Bowl guy, another guy who, you know, just has every measurable you could possibly want at the defensive end position. But it wasn't. You ended up picking at 14, and it's just too bad. And one of the reasons that this is in the D range instead of maybe a C- is the just sheer number of Pro Bowlers that could have been selected instead of Marcus Davenport. You know, whether you did it at 27 or you did it at 14. If you look at the other names available at 14, you go the 16 through 20 picks in this draft, every single one was a Pro Bowler. That's number 16. You had Tremaine Edmonds, linebacker, went to the Bills, safety Derwin James to the Chargers, cornerback Jair Alexander to the Packers, linebacker Leighton Vander Esch to the Cowboys, and center Frank Ragnow to the Lions. Can you imagine a defensive backfield of Marshawn Lattimore and Jair Alexander? Because it could have happened. It could have existed. And instead, there was the Marcus Davenport experiment that didn't quite go so well. If you wanted to stick at 27, which again, if they picked Marcus Davenport at 27, who knows if he would have been there, but if they had, I would be a lot softer on this pick in terms of your options at 27 are a lot different than your options at 14. At 14, you need to bring in a stud because that's the type of player that's available. And if you miss that opportunity, it really sets you back, especially for a team that doesn't pick in the top 10 every year. But if you had stayed at 27, you had options like number 32, quarterback Lamar Jackson. He went to the Ravens. 35, Nick Chubb to the Browns. Running back, linebacker Shaq Leonard to the Colts. Wide receiver Courtland Sutton to the Broncos. Linebacker Harold Landry to the Titans. Now, these are only the Pro Bowlers, right? These are only the guys who have made a Pro Bowl pretty early in their career, and that could increase, right? These are still young players who are in the prime of their careers and couldn't end up in the Pro Bowl. Some other players who they could have picked, other players who were just really quality players that they didn't get a shot at. Wide receiver Christian Kirk, he went to the Cardinals at 47. Tight end Dallas Goedert went to the Eagles at 49. Safety Jesse Bates, who cashed in with the Falcons this offseason despite not making a Pro Bowl. He went to the Bengals at number 54. Dante Jackson, cornerback guy at LSU, went to the Panthers at 55. Any of those picks would have probably been a higher quality pick than Marcus Davenport, and you could have got it at number 27 and saved your 2019 first round pick. So for that reason, it's a D. It is a D. It is about as close as you can get to a failing grade. It's not that high above Stephon Anthony, but it is just in the sense that he did play 5 years on the team. He was productive when he was out there, and a lot of it was injury based. But so those are the real bad grades. There are a couple more that are on the fringe, but those are the bad grades when you look at Mickey Loomis, when you look at what this front office has done over the past decade plus of drafting. And so, when you look at it and you really kind of say, this is a team that's been very aggressive. It's a team that's traded up several times. It's a team that always goes and gets its guy. To only have 2 major misses, I think is probably a good thing. And from here on out, you're just going C's, B's, and A's. So let's wrap up that segment. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about kind of the middle ground picks. Because one of the things that I do grade negatively is, why weren't they here for a second contract? Right? And that's true of a lot of guys. And it does drag down the value to me a little bit, because when you see the top grade of this whole shebang, there's going to be a clear reason why that's the case. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. We are going through the last 10 first-round picks and giving them all grades ahead of the 2023 NFL Draft coming up first round on Thursday. This is a special NFL Draft edition. I'm Jeff Nowak, coming at you solo. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Hit the subscribe button. Leave a review, please. Appreciate it. Tell your friends. Tell your dog. It's a good time. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold, a special NFL Draft preview edition. It's not really a preview. I don't know why I said that. It's more of a postscript. Does that make sense? We're looking back. We're looking back at the past 10, actually 11 first-round draft picks, giving them all grades. So far, we've gone through the 3 incompletes, so I'm not giving them an official grade yet. That was Chris Olave, Trevor Penning, Peyton Turner. And we've also gone through the D's. Stephon Anthony in 2015 and Marcus Davenport in 2018. But now we're going to start looking at some of the more positive picks. We're going to start with the C's and B's in this segment. Then we're going to go into the really positive ones. Close out the segment on a good note. Again, my name is Jeff Nowak. I'm WWL Digital Sports Producer. You can follow me at Jeff_Nowak on Twitter. You can follow my latest content at WWL.com, as well as a whole lot of other content. You can also catch up with me on Sports Talk on Fridays from 4 to 8 p.m. 504-260-1870. Text or call. I've memorized that number and I'm proud of it. It's one of like 3 numbers that I have memorized in my brain. But all right, let's start with the C. And I give this a C+ because this player was a solid contributor for the Saints, right? He just wasn't at a premium position, and he went pretty early. We're talking about Kenny Vaccaro. He was the number 15 pick in 2013, safety out of Texas. And, the stats are solid. I think he was a good player. In his Saints career, started 67 games. He had 8 interceptions, 385 tackles, 23 tackles for a loss, 7.5 sacks. He was a good player. What really holds him back in my eyes is A, safety, and B, you look at the long, long list of Pro Bowlers from this draft, and the Saints didn't get any of them, right? So, this first one, 18, safety Eric Reed out of LSU. I don't mind that, right? If you're going for a safety and you're picking between Kenny Vaccaro and Eric Reed, Kyle Long to the Bears at number 20, Tyler Eifert to the Bengals at 21, Desmond Trufant to the Falcons at 22, Xavier Rhodes to the Vikings at 25, and the one that really burns is DeAndre Hopkins to the Texans at number 27. The fact that he fell all the way to 27 is wild. Out of Clemson, then Zach Ertz to the Eagles at 35. Darius Slay to the Lions at 36. Then Geno Smith is also on this list, quarterback to the Jets, although you could very much point out that he was not a good pick by the Jets because he did not have success with the Jets. Also, Travis Frederick, center, went to the Cowboys at 31. Cordero Patterson went to the Vikings at 29. So, there's not a ton of names there. Like, Darius Slay, I would have loved to have. DeAndre Hopkins would have loved to have. Xavier Rhodes was very, very good in the same period that the Saints had Kenny Vaccaro. My big issue with Kenny is you didn't bring him back. You're going to spend the number 15 pick on a guy. You're not going to give him a second contract. And, I don't know if that you hold that against the pick, but it is frustrating. And it's the reason that I'm giving this a C+ instead of a B. Because if you're taking a guy at 15, it should be a guy you expect to be a part of your team for an extended period of time. It should not be a rookie contract and out the door situation. And that's what it was. And that frustrates me because I see that happen with the Saints more than I'd like. And it's not always with the first round picks. That includes second rounders, third rounders, like a guy like Von Bell leaving after his rookie deal, Marcus Williams leaving after his rookie deal, CJ Gardner-Johnson leaving before the end of his rookie deal. Like, those are frustrating to me because when you hit in the draft, you want to cash in on that for the duration of their career, not just the first contract. So that's why I'm giving him a C+. Good player. It's just not an example of the best draft pick you've seen from the Saints. If this was the 25th pick, I would be perfectly okay with it. A safety at 15, better be a star. I don't know if he was. Going forward, 2016, very similar type of pick. We're talking Sheldon Rankins, defensive tackle out of Louisville. This is another one where he didn't stay past his rookie deal. In Sheldon's case, he was dealing with a lot more injury issues than Kenny that kept him off the field. He was a very good player. He was at a premium position. Why couldn't you keep him around? That's the frustrating thing to me is you're letting too many of these guys leave after developing them. And, he hasn't been a star with the Jets, but he did have success when he was in New Orleans. He was a run stuffer. He could get after the quarterback. He started 33 games for the Saints. He had 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles, 17 and a half sacks, 116 tackles. He was a good player. Wasn't a great player. And when you're picking at 12, which is where you were in this draft, you really want to get a great player. Similar to the breakdown on Vaccaro, I just didn't get enough. I didn't get enough out of that high pick. And the Saints don't get a lot of high picks, or at least they haven't in their recent history. So I would have liked to see more. What saves the Saints a little bit here, in my opinion, is I don't see a ton of misses when you go back and you look. The big name would be Laramie Tunsil. He went to the Dolphins at number 13. But if you remember this draft day, Laramie Tunsil, the morning of the draft, tweeted out a video of himself hitting a gas mask bong. And however you land on the weed question, right? That's not what you want to see as a team. We've talked to Michael Hodges earlier this offseason. He said this is a team that when they identify character concerns with a player, they literally put him on the board in a different color to make sure they don't draft him by accident. I don't know. I would imagine that morning when that video came out, there wasn't even a conversation. They just took him off the board because that's just not a question you want to have to answer on draft day, regardless of the quality of the player. And the Dolphins took him the next pick, but I don't blame the Saints for not taking Laramie Tunsil at all. It ended up not being an issue. He's had an excellent career. He's an excellent offensive tackle. I'm not going to get too mad about them skipping there because let's face it, 11 other teams skipped too. So I don't think the Saints are the team that was ever going to take that leap at number 12. Keep going. Safety Keanu Neal went to the Falcons at 17. Ryan Kelly, the center, went to the Colts at 18. Defensive tackle Kenny Clark to the Packers at 27. Linebacker Jalen Smith to the Cowboys at 34. Guy who's not even on a roster anymore. He ended up latching on with the Giants mid-season last year, so that's not a miss. Xavier Howard, cornerback to the Dolphins at number 38. Probably the best name that you would have liked to see them bring in here, just in terms of at this point, they were really questionable at the cornerback spot, right? This was pre-Marshawn Lattimore. Still, he ended up down at 38. So That's a pretty far cry from 13. And if you want to question this, it's more, okay, should they have traded back and collected assets if they didn't love Sheldon Rankins at number 12? But they just don't do that. So if you're going to ding them for that, you're going to ding them on every pick. So that's 2016. Sheldon Rankins, I'm giving it a B-. Then there is one other B- here. And it's 2015. And this is probably going to rub some people the wrong way in terms of he has a bad rap for availability, for maybe not being the best in pass protection. It's Andrus Peat, guard out of Stanford. They took him at number 13. I'm giving him a B-. And the reason is at the guard position, pass protection is obviously hugely important, but so is run blocking. And I think one thing that a lot of people overlook with Andrus Peat is he is an excellent pulling guard. He really is. I would put him in the top 10 of the NFL in terms of his run and blocking ability, pulling from one side of the line and kind of plowing the road. You saw it a lot with Michael Burton and Andrus Peat when they were running that QB power for Taysom Hill. They did it incredibly well. This past season, I think that changed a little bit just because of how you were using Taysom Hill. Still a good run blocker, still an effective player, right? You're talking 8 years in, still a starting caliber guard in the NFL. And the only question is, can he stay healthy? And so that's why I look at it and I say, okay, B-, just because it's another guy who couldn't stay healthy throughout the course of his career. When he's on the field, he's good. Hasn't been enough of that. All that said, you look at the players they could have potentially taken, the Pro Bowlers that went in 2015 after the Saints took Pete. Melvin Gordon, running back to the Chargers, really good early in his career. Hasn't really done much in the last few years. Marcus Peters, cornerback, went to the Chiefs. DJ Humphries went to the Cardinals at number 24, offensive tackle. Byron Jones to the Cowboys, super athletic. I think he still holds the broad jump record at the combine. To the Cowboys, number 27. And then guard Locken Tomlinson, number 28. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know what you're going to do here in terms of who could, oh man, they should have taken this guy. Yeah, you would have loved to see them get Marcus Peters. But again, you look at a lot of these players, they missed on their cornerbacks. And again, this is a time where the Saints really should have been loading up on cornerbacks and weren't necessarily doing that early in the draft. And you see now that they've done that, now that they've started to kind of build that out, the defense sure looks a lot better. And so, yeah, we're getting closer to the Dennis Allen era, but we're not in it with this pick. In both of these examples, in these B- examples, I mean, what hurts for the Saints, honestly, in this 2015 draft more than Pete is the fact that you whipped on Stephon Anthony, right? So you had two chances you did two bites at the apple, and in neither case did you really land a star. And that's frustrating. If you go back to the previous when we talked about Sheldon Rankins, you landed Michael Thomas in the second round of that draft. So while Sheldon might not have been the greatest pick in terms of value at number 12, you probably got the best possible player you could have gotten in the second round. So it balances out. In this case, with in 2015, it doesn't, because Stephon Anthony was a failure to launch, and Andrus Peat has been good, not great. Going forward, which is really going backward 1 year, there's a trend developing, which is in the mid 2010s, a lot of Bs, a lot of middling picks, right? And so this is 2014, the number 20 pick, wide receiver Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State. I'm giving it a B, just a straight B. And obviously he wasn't on the team for past his rookie contract either, but you did get the value out of him more so than a Stephon Anthony, than a Sheldon Rankins, than a Kenny Vaccaro who left for nothing. In Cooks's play, in Cooks's situation, you traded him. So there was enough value there. You actually cashed in for a first round pick. And you also had a quality player. Brandon Cooks was good. Brandon Cooks is good. Brandon Cooks is one of the most consistent wide receivers we've seen in the NFL over the last decade. He has had the misfortune of being on the Texans the last few years. I don't think he wants to be there, but he was on the Patriots, he was on the Rams. He was very good with both of those teams. Just did not fit in terms of Michael Thomas showed up and was a star, did not work for Brandon Cooks, so they had to move him. Still, you look at the players they could have taken, he was at number 20. It makes it a little easier to stomach when you're not getting that type of value because you're picking in the back half of the draft. But you could have got 21, HaHa Clinton Dix. He went to the Packers. I liked HaHa Clinton Dix. I enjoy saying his name, but I'm okay with the wide receiver pick there. D4 defensive end of the Chiefs. Jason Verrett to the Chargers, the cornerback. Teddy Bridgewater to the Vikings at number 32, ended up on the Saints. The guy, this next name is the one that honestly surprises me. Didn't end up on the Saints. Defensive end, DeMarcus Lawrence. He went to the Cowboys at 34. 20 might have been a reach for him, but you look at how the Saints typically overdraft defensive ends, the athleticism, the long arms, the ability to play the run. He was the fact that he didn't end up on the Saints is kind of wild to me when you look back at it. But yeah, that's probably the one miss, in my opinion, who I would rather have seen them take over a Brandon Cooks. But that's a minor criticism. Joel Bitonio, offensive tackle, went to the Browns at 35. Derek Carr to the Raiders, now the Saints quarterback, at 36. Those were the Pro Bowlers within 30 picks of Brandon Cooks. Again, much like Pete, one of the reasons the Brandon Cooks pick hurts is not necessarily the Brandon Cooks pick. It's what you back that up with, which was in the second round. You took Stanley Jean-Baptiste, a guy who you only remember because he has a unique name. If his name was John Smith, you'd be like, who? That's how little impact he had. And that was the pick that really makes you look at this draft like, ugh. And it's partially because had you taken a HaHa Clinton Dix or DeMarcus Lawrence at 20, you'd have been going into your second round pick, still being like, I like our need at what I think we have a need at wide receiver. Who can we get? And Allen Robinson or Jarvis Landry would have been staring right at you. Both have been excellent. Jarvis really had a strong start to his career. Allen Robinson was a star with the Jags. He was one of the key reasons they got to the AFC Championship game. Then he had some injuries. He didn't fit in last year with the Rams, but I mean, that's frustrating because Stanley Jean-Baptiste, that's rough. All right. One more on the B side, and this is kind of a asterisk a little bit. If we have 11 picks, this is kind of the 10th and a half pick because it's Cesar Ruiz, the 2020 number 24 overall pick. I'm giving this a B/incomplete, meaning, you're going into the fourth season of this deal, and he has a chance to kind of bump this up into the B+, maybe A- range if he continues on the trajectory that he hit in year 3. Because if you had asked me this question after year 2, I would have been a lot closer to a D based on the production we have seen. But he did take a major step forward in the 2022 season. I would argue that he was the best offensive lineman on the Saints for a majority of the season. Obviously, Eric McCoy got hurt and he had to shift over to center for multiple games. But you are really concerned about the value of this pick when it happened and when you saw the struggles as a rookie and the struggles in his second year. You can chalk a lot of it up to COVID and the difficult nature of how he came to the NFL and didn't have real off seasons and the programs weren't right and he had multiple coaches. And I think he really picked it up last year. And the pick looks a lot better when you consider who else are you taking? Again, this is 24. This is not 14. So the Pro Bowlers that went behind him, keep in mind this number will get higher as we go forward. This is only year 4 for these players. Jonathan Taylor at number 41 of the Colts. Obviously, the Saints would love to have a really prime running back alongside Alvin Kamara, but you have to draft him to do that. And that's probably the one pick I'm just like, man, yeah, give me a running back. Please give me a running back. Safety Antoine Winfield, 45 to the Bucks. Trayvon Diggs, cornerback, 51 of the Cowboys. Jalen Hurts, 53 to the Eagles. A quarterback would have been nice too, but I don't think anyone but the Eagles at this point really believed in Jalen Hurts. Definitely not enough to make him a first-round pick, so I'm not going to be mad about that. Some other guys who could have gone to the Saints, been quality players, or at least could be quality players. 25, wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. That was the pick after Ruiz. He went to the 49ers. Quarterback Jordan Love to the Packers. Who knows? We're going to find out a lot this year, assuming Aaron Rodgers actually does get traded to the Jets, because this will be the year that maybe Jordan Love can actually, show if he can be an NFL quarterback. At this point, we don't know. And the Saints could have drafted him here. It ended up being Drew Brees' final season, so it would have been nice to have a guy like Jordan Love learning behind Drew Brees, but you did have Jameis Winston. I think in the Saints' mind, they were committed to Jameis, and he ended up starting for 10 games over 2 seasons. You can't forecast injuries, but would have been nice to have. Either way, I'm not too mad about it, assuming that Cesar Ruiz ends up being a long-term starter, Pro Bowl caliber guard at that position. Linebacker Patrick Queen, kid out of LSU, went to the Ravens at 28. He's a guy that I think a lot of people wanted to see the Saints draft, but you look at how they've done at linebacker and the names they brought in and the quality they pull outside of the first round, and it's hard for me to ever be mad about not taking a linebacker in the first round for the Saints. Wide receiver T. Higgins to the Bengals at 33. Michael Pittman Jr. to the Colts at 34. I would have liked to see one of those two guys end up on the Saints, either first or second round pick, but they obviously kind of waited on that wide receiver need. Sean Payton felt like he could pull diamonds out of the rough and didn't quite work out. Then finally, safety Xavier McKinney to the Giants. I still think that's a steal at number 36, best safety in the draft. But yeah, that's a B to me. I'd like to see Caesar come back. Hopefully he can recover from that Lisfranc injury. And I hear a lot of people tell me that the Saints offensive line is in shambles. I don't see it that way because you have a young player like Cesar Ruiz. Because you have first round pick quality players at all of these spots, right? You have Trevor Penning at left tackle. Hopefully he can step in there. You have Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle. Yes, he's getting older, but he's still probably a top 5 right tackle in the NFL. You have Andres Pete, who, if he can stay healthy, is a solid quality guard. Again, they don't grow on trees. Would you rather have Larry Warford, right? There aren't that many Pro Bowl caliber guards, and he is one of them. Center, you have Eric McCoy, who I'd argue is top 5 center in the NFL. You got him in the second round. And then you have Cesar Ruiz. So I don't see it. I think the depth is an issue, but I don't think that 5-man rotation is anything to be concerned about beyond availability, beyond the fact that a lot of them get hurt and offensive linemen get hurt as fast as anybody in the NFL, and you have to have depth behind them. But I don't think it's the dumpster fire that a lot of people do. And Cesar Ruiz stepping into that role and stepping up is a big part of why that is. All right, let's wrap up that segment. That was the middle round. That was the middle grade. That was the C's and the B's of the Saints' last 10 picks. And all we have left of the Saints' last 10 first-round picks, and all we have left are the A's, baby. We're going all in on the A's, not the baseball team. All right, let's wrap that segment up. My name is Jeff Nowak. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, let's do that. We're getting ready for the NFL draft. This is kind of a special pre-draft episode going back to the last Saints 10 first-round picks and giving them all grades. Coming up, you probably know these names. All of them are still on the team. And yes, I have good reasons. All right, stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, WWL Digital Sports producer. Subscribe, please. This is a special pre-draft edition of Inside Black and Gold. We're going through the Saints' last 10 first-round picks, giving them all grades, telling you who was good, who was bad. And a lot of them, the majority, not too bad. It's hard to really complain about the Saints' draft strategy if you're not complaining about volume, right? Would I have loved to see the Saints maximize their assets in terms of total number? Yes. Do I think they have missed consistently? No. And that's how you remain a competent, competitive franchise for a long time. It's not building through free agency. It is building through the draft, and it is hitting on your early picks. And that's what the Saints have done. They have not hit on their late picks in the last several years. And I think that's probably the difference when you look at the last 10 years versus the 10 before that, where you look at 2006 and you pull guys like Zach Strief and Marcus Colston out of the 7th round, right? You just haven't really done that enough over the last several years, but you have, for the most part, hit on your first round picks, with the exception of Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner, which, again, Peyton Turner, we're giving an incomplete grade. Hopefully he can find it. But these are the picks you did hit on. And I'm doing this a little differently in the sense that both of these drafts, you had multiple first round picks. So I'm not going by the lowest to the highest. I'm just breaking them down by draft. The first one we're going to go through is the 2017 draft. You picked at number 11. You picked at number 32. This is the first round pick you brought back in the Brandon Cooks trade, right? You sent him to the Patriots. You got the number 32 overall pick. And I think some people might be surprised at these grades in that these are both A-plus players. You got Marshawn Lattimore, cornerback at Ohio State at number 11. You got Ryan Ramczyk, right tackle out of Wisconsin at number 32. Both these guys, A-plus players if you were just grading the player, grading the draft pick. But I am grading the front office a little bit here too. And I'm giving the Marshawn Lattimore pick an A-. Again, not the player, the pick. Because I don't think you could have gotten a better player at number 11. I'm giving the front office an A-, and for both of these picks, they're getting dinged for a similar reason. The Saints wanted to take Marshawn. The Saints wanted to take Pat Mahomes at number 11. The Saints were ready to draft a generational quarterback at number 11. We know that. Sean Payton won't shut up about it. But he should be embarrassed about it because, yes, sure, you identified that guy, but then you allowed the Chiefs to trade ahead of you to number 10 and take that guy. And what have the Chiefs done since going to Pat Mahomes? Yeah, they've only won 2 Super Bowls, been to another AFC Championship game. Yeah, that would have been nice, huh? And so for that reason, I'm dinging this pick. You still landed, I'd argue, the best available player at number 11 with how the board went. But that player was not Pat Mahomes, and I'm dinging the front office for that. A front office that loves to trade. Hell, maybe this is the reason they're so proactive about trading, is that if they had been more proactive in this draft, they could have ended up with Pat Mahomes, and instead they got traded in front of. So, yeah, I mean, A-, still a very good grade. They still did a very good job. They just held serve. You know, if anything, you might say, hey, we need to be more tight-lipped about our draft strategy, because it sure seems like the Chiefs knew the Saints were going to pick Pat Mahomes at number 11 because they made sure to get up to 10. But yeah, again, I need to be clear. I'm not giving Marshawn Lattimore an A-. I'm giving the front office an A- for the fact that they did not get to pick Pat Mahomes, the guy they wanted. Anyway, going down to 32, I'm giving this one an A. And for a similar reason, the Saints wanted to take Reuben Foster. Now, the 49ers traded in front of them and did them a favor. But again, for the second time in this draft, you got leapfrogged. Other teams knew exactly who you were going after and knew that if they wanted them, they had to trade in front of you, and that's what they did. The Saints ended up with their backup plan in Ryan Ramczyk, and again, the 49ers saved them from themselves. But that can't happen, right? And, you know, if you want to look at these past few seasons and you see the Saints trade up, make sure they get their guy, you might look back at the 2017 draft and be like, hey, that may be the kind of rosebud of all of this. They've always been proactive about trading up, but it seems like it has gotten to a different level in the last few years. And maybe getting leapfrogged twice in the 2017 draft, granted, one of the best draft in team history, maybe the best draft in team history, could have played a role. I'm giving this one an A because at 32 to land your, a premier right tackle who's going to be there for the next 10 years. I mean, that in any other instance, that would be an A+. I'm taking it down a half grade just because you can't keep getting leapfrogged. You have to be pushing the action, and I don't like to see that. I don't think the Saints like to see that either, even if you did get kind of backed into the correct pick. And I think that's what happens when the Saints do get leapfrogged. They tend to just reactionarily push the offensive line button, or maybe the defensive line button. That's what they did here, and it worked out. Some other picks. So if you're looking at the potential picks that you could have got behind Marshawn Lattimore, number 12, Deshaun Watson to the Texans. Number 13, Hassan Reddick to the Cardinals, defensive end. Marlon Humphrey, cornerback to the Ravens. He's been good, but you already got the best cornerback in the draft, so you can't be mad about it. Defensive end Jonathan Allen to the Commanders. Tight end Evan Engram to the Giants at 23. Cornerback Tre'Davious White to the Bills, LSU guy at number 27. And then TJ Watt to the Steelers at number 30. He was not going at number 11, right? So you can't be mad about that. And probably the second best player on this list is Tre'Davious White. But again, you got Marshawn Lattimore. So you really can't argue with the decision. It's only the fact that you got leapfrogged and didn't get the best quarterback of his generation because of it that I'm putting this at an A-. For the Ramczyk pick, I mean, it gets even easier, right? Safety Budda Baker, number 36. And again, these are just the Pro Bowlers. Safety Budda Baker at number 36 went to the Cardinals. Dalvin Cook went to the Vikings at 41. Joe Mixon went to the Bengals at 48. Juju Smith-Schuster went to the Steelers at 62. Guard Deion Dawkins went to the Bills at 63. The only thing you could say about this list is, man, you really could have nabbed a superstar running back with that second first-round pick. And the rebuttal to that would be, well, you got Alvin Kamara in the third round of this draft. So I don't think you are kicking yourself over not getting that running back at 32 when you got your right tackle. And I would argue a better running back than either Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon in terms of just overall talent and production. So, yeah, not mad about that. Again, that's an A. Both A-plus players, but the Saints got leapfrogged, and they need to be better about that. Okay, 2 more, and then a couple bonus picks. 2011. These are the oldest picks we are looking at, but still players that were on the team last year. That tells you how good these picks were. 2011, at number 24, defensive end, Cam Jordan out of California. A+. That is the only A+ on my list. Like we talked about with Jonathan Sullivan, right? There has to be a floor below Stephon Anthony for him to exist on, right? In this case, I am ready to be like, you will not find a better example of a nailed it first round draft pick than Cameron freaking Jordan. Again, number 24. This is not a top 10 pick. This is the number 24 pick, and you got a guy who is available every game, right? The NFL had to sit him down with COVID despite him feeling perfectly fine in order to have him miss a game, right? He got gouged in the eye last year, still wanted to play. The team had to be like, no, Cam, like you need to not do that. He had an orbital bone fracture and he rested for a week and he was back the next week. Like that's the type of player you had. This is a Hall of Famer at number 24. So I'm giving that an A+. I mean, I don't even know how you argue it, right? Muhammad Wilkerson to the Jets at number 30, Cam Hayward to the Steelers at 31, Andy Dalton to the Bengals at 35, tight end Kyle Rudolph to the Vikings at 43, and then guard Rodney Hudson to the Chiefs at 55. Those are the only other Pro Bowlers from 24 to 54, right? So, I mean, you are not going to find a better example. And that's why I am comfortable maxing out this grade. Max it out. Because you're going to go back, at least in terms of the first round, like you can find better examples of more diamond in the rough picks. Marcus Colston, obviously, is probably the best example of that. Zach Strief as well. But in terms of the first round picks in Saints history, you're not going to find a better one. The next pick in this round for the Saints, 4 picks later, Mark Ingram out of Alabama. I'm giving it an A. And one of the reasons is running back in the first round is a risk. You need to make sure not only that this is a productive player, this is going to be a productive player for a long time. And it was, right? You know, I ding it a little bit because you let him get out the door. But again, you maximize what you were going to get out of Mark Ingram. He was productive with the Ravens. He was productive with the Texans. Then you brought him back and got 2 more productive seasons out of him. In terms of a running back pick, it's hard to see this be going any better than what you got out of Mark Ingram. You were able to pair him with Alvin Kamara in 2017 for what I would argue is one of the most impressive tandem running back seasons in NFL history. I think both went over 1,000 yards. And yeah, I can't hate it. He's on the fringe. He's on the low end of A, if that makes sense. He's closer to an A- than an A+. But still, this is your second pick in 4 picks. You got 2 Pro Bowlers. You got 2 team Hall of Famers. You got at least 1 legit Hall of Famer. Mark Ingram is the Saints' all-time leading rusher. And you got him at number 28. And so that's a big part of this to me is where you picked versus the vetting. And 28 to get your all-time leading rusher, Hard to complain about that. 2 more picks I will look at. And the only reason is they were the first pick for the Saints in this draft. They were not in the first round. So these are the 2 years the Saints did not have a first round pick. 2019, 2012. 2019 was a big year for this team because they had to nail their picks. They had to nail their picks because you spent 2 first rounders on Marcus Davenport. Didn't work out. So what did you do? Well, traded up in the second round, ended up bringing in Eric McCoy. Starting center from day one. Never missed a snap. Obviously, the last 2 seasons, he dealt with some lower body injuries. But, I mean, you were trying to replace Max Unger, who retired suddenly. And you did. You did for a guy who stepped in right away. If you were drafting in the first round, you probably are taking a center. You're probably taking Eric McCoy. So that, to me, is another example of an A-plus pick. If we extended this out, there'd be a different rubric for second round, third round, fourth round. But just overall, if you're going for A-plus grades on picks, he's one of them. The other one is 2012, and that's Akeem Hicks, defensive end at number 89. I put that in more of like the A- B+ range because the Saints didn't get a ton out of him, but he was a good player. He was a quality player for a long time. He's still a quality player. He was on the Bucs last season. Those are 2 kind of interesting ones when you look at it, and the Saints have been very good in the third round. If we were grading all-time Saints draft picks, and at least in the last 20 years or so, a lot of those would be third round. A lot of those would be the Jimmy Grahams, the Alvin Kamara's, right? The Trey Hendricksons, the Teron Armsteads, right? We're not talking about those in this one. But yeah, 2019, 2012, that's Eric McCoy out of Texas A&M. Man, what a great draft pick. And you look at the other picks in that draft, they only had, I think, 5 picks. 3 of them were Eric McCoy out of Texas A&M, center. Didn't have a third round pick, came back CJ Gardner-Johnson in the 4th round. Obviously, the end of his Saints career was not pretty, but really good player. Did a lot for the team. Hard to hate that. He's on the Lions now. A guy who's very grating, I think, in a lot of instances, and the Saints maximized what they could get out of him, and just they had to move on. And then 7th round, Caden Ellis, which is a very good pick in terms of development. The Falcons are going to benefit more from that than the Saints did, right? Like the Saints only got about 8 games of kind of starting play out of Caden Ellis, but it was a very good 8 games. So, you look at the opportunities in that draft, in the 2012 draft, in the 2019 draft. And again, it's not even one with the first round pick. So it's not even that relevant to this list that I put together. But man, you really nailed those picks. So it does seem like when you kind of back the Saints up against a wall and say, you have one chance, you better make it count. They tend to do it, right? It seems like when they miss, it's because they have too many chances. It's like when they have one dart and they're focused, they're hitting a bullseye. When you give them 3 darts, it kind of feels like they're gonna hit. They're gonna miss around it, right? They're gonna hit outside the circle, and it's interesting. And so that's what you have to hope for if you're looking at this draft. It's one of the later picks they have had, not because they were good, it's because they were bad and had to figure things out without Sean Payton. They traded Sean Payton to the Broncos. They brought in 29, a pick that has taken a really interesting journey from the Dolphins to the Broncos to the 49ers, whatever. That's where the Saints are going to pick, and I'm cautiously optimistic. If a guy like Bijan Robinson falls and you just nail a perfect skill position pick, great. I think you're going to go defensive line because it seems like that's where the value is in the late first round. But I've learned, and we've all learned, to never tune into the draft late. Because if you do, there's a chance you miss the Saints pick because they went up and got somebody. So keep that in mind. I hope this podcast was interesting. I hope you got something out of it. Again, we went through the last 10 first round picks. We gave them all grades. We explained why. I explained why. My name is Jeff Nowak. This was a solo podcast. Steve Geller will be back on Wednesday for kind of our normally scheduled podcast, getting ready for the draft. On Thursday, first round, second round, and third round will be Friday, and then the 4th through 7th rounds will be Saturday. I'll be out at the Saints facility, kind of getting all of this live. We're going to get interviews with the draft picks shortly after they're made. I'll also be, as I mentioned, on the Odyssey Sports 2023 draft special. Shortly after the Saints pick at 29, I'll be on with Brian Baldinger and Jason La Canfora breaking down, what the pick was, reasons why, all that good stuff. Hopefully it's one of my mock draft picks so that I have all the information right away. I'm sure it will not be. I'm sure it'll be a player I've never heard of. But hey, that's the fun. Thanks everyone for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that. Please leave a rating, leave a review, hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. I'm also going to post this as a story on WWL.com on Monday. So if you want to kind of get a in-depth breakdown or at least kind of have a guide to follow along with, go check that out. And all of my latest content over at WWL.com. All right, y'all. Going to be a crazy week. Thanks for listening. Who dat?